Welcome back to Harbaugh. Just over 3 months to go before the election, and Pennsylvania's strict new photo ID law may be having the effect its Republicans intended to have, keeping likely Democrats from voting. Well, a new report commissioned by the ACLU, one of the plaintiffs in the case against Pennsylvania's strict photo ID law, shows that there are 1 million registered voters in Pennsylvania. That is, people who have voted and expect to vote in this election who think they have the right to vote, the right ID to cast a ballot, but actually don't have the right ID. The report also shows that 1 in 3 registered voters in the states don't even know that there is a new voting requirement. Well, Jim Burns, chairman of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, which is gearing up its Get Out the Vote effort, and Judith Brown Deannis is a co-director of the Advancement Project. The group is one of the plaintiffs in the case. Deannis. It's very Massachusetts. Anyway, Deannis. Let me go to Jim. Good guy, Jim. You got a challenge on your hands. It looks to me like it's a two-front war. One front is trying to win this case in the Pennsylvania courts on the constitutionality of this thing, the question of whether it is constitutional to set up this kind of barrier to voting. And secondly, if it holds up in court, how to deal with it come November. Your thoughts on that two-front war?
You're absolutely right, Chris. There is a two-front war, and we're fighting it on both fronts as effectively as we can. Let me jump to the second point first. How are we preparing in the event it does not get stricken down? We're identifying, we're outreaching, and we are recruiting Pennsylvania voters who we think are affected by this. And some of those folks who you mentioned that either don't have it or don't know that they lack the proper credentials, we're getting to them. And we've been doing it. Next week, we're really pushing with our Get Out the Vote efforts to reach out to those whom we've targeted to make sure they have what they need in the event that we do not strike down this law.
So what do they need?
Well, they need one of 6 forms of identification. Our governor can't name them, but let me tell the governor what the law is that he signed. You either have a military ID, you either have a federal ID like a passport, a state-issued ID like a driver's license, either a health care facility that's run by the state, a university form of identification, or some form of a municipal identification. Those are the 6 things you need. And if you don't have them, you're going to need to come with some type of a birth certificate or some type of a form of credential that shows...
Well, my health card doesn't have my picture on it. Would that qualify?
No. You're going to have a problem. And you may think that that's enough, and you'll do nothing between now and November if you live in Pennsylvania. We'll get to you, Chris, and we'll make sure that even though if we're knocking on your door, you say, I'm fine, move to the next house, we'll make sure we ask you specifically why you think you have what you need, and if you don't, we'll make sure that you do.
Okay, just to be a good public interest show, the minute somebody looks in their wallet right now or their purse and looks around the house, I hope you're all doing that in Pennsylvania especially, and you can't find this means of identification, which is basically a government-issued ID card with your picture on it. It's current. What do? You have to call your committee person, or what do you do to make sure you get to the right? You have to go to PennDOT, which is basically a DMV, and there's only 5 of them in the whole city of Philadelphia, so you have to get on the subway or get on the bus and get there, right? You got to do the work.
That's exactly right, and we've touched on this before. Reach out to your committee person. Reach out to someone in government who has given you reliable information in the past and say, look, this is my situation. This is what I have. Is it enough? If you have access to a computer, we would invite you to go to our webpage, www.padems.com/vote. There you can find out whether or not you have what you need. And while you're there, look at the video of Governor Corbett failing to be able to name the 6 forms of ID.
Okay, you got your shot. Let's try to help here. I know the shots are sometimes appropriate here. Let's say this. Democrats say that the real intent of the voter ID law is to give an advantage to Mitt Romney this November. Pennsylvania House Majority Leader Mike Turzai actually said, he certainly said that when he talked about it last month. Let's hear the guy basically indicting himself here.
We are focused on making sure that we meet our obligations that we've talked about for years. Pro-Second Amendment, the Castle Doctrine's done. First pro-life legislation, abortion facility regulations in 22 years, done. Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania, done.
Well, there's a photo ID this guy never wants to see again, where he comes out and publicly basically says the purpose of this new ID law is not to prevent crime or corruption or anything else. It's to get this guy Romney to pull an upset in Pennsylvania.
You know, as lawyers, we call that the smoking gun evidence.
I call it the Perry Mason moment.
That's
when
right.
When the bad guy stands up and says, you got me.
That's right, because this is the smoking gun evidence of voter suppression. There was no evidence of voter fraud in Pennsylvania, but there is evidence of voter suppression. And so Advancement Project projects in court.
Okay, you're a lawyer, right?
That's right.
You're a lawyer. What chance do you got in the constitutional fight in Harrisburg with the federal courts?
We think we have a very good chance. Advancement Project is counsel in that case because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has said this is a fundamental right to have the voice to be able to elect people who are going to make the laws that govern your life.
Is this like the old literacy test they used to say to the black person in the South? How do you spell this? How do you give me some Greek philosophy? These incredible questions they used to nail people with.
Well, it's the new barrier. It's the new wave barrier, and we know who it impacts the most. It impacts African Americans, Latinos, and elderly people who turned out in record numbers in 2000.
Also, the people who live in the old ethnic neighborhoods, by the way, not just black people. Let's face it. A lot of these old neighbors in South Philly and places like that. A lot of people live in row houses. They don't all drive.
And
the older they get, the more they shouldn't drive.
Right.
To be blunt about it. To be blunt.
It disproportionately impacts Philadelphia. And that, again, that is no coincidence. This was really cooked up with a real partisan effort to win this election.
Let me talk to you about talk turkey with you, Jim, and this is real politics. I'm looking at these numbers. I think it's a reach for the Republicans, but I think this election is explosive. I don't think it's too close to call. I think it's too early to call this election. I don't know which way it's going to zigzag between now and November, but we've got a new number out here. Real Clear Politics average. It says it's within 47 to 42. To me, that's no difference at all. That's almost within the point spread, within the margin of error. Your thoughts about whether, with the help of this ID card requirement, the Republicans could steal that state?
Well, Chris, with the help of the ID card, if the state party and others were not doing due diligence, assuming it's not struck down, if we sat on our hands, yes, there could be a significant contributing factor to their efforts here in Pennsylvania to steal this state away from President Obama. But having said that, and I've touched on this before, we are not going to allow that contingency to take place. We've been proactive in dealing with this unfair and unnecessary piece of legislation, and we will continue to be aggressive in our efforts in that regard. But yes, I mean, if we were to sit around and do nothing and believe the trumped-up explanations for this unnecessary bill, then yeah, there could be a problem. But we will not allow it to happen here.
Like your spirit, sir. Thank you very much, Jim Byrne, chairman of the Democratic Party of Pennsylvania. Judith Brown Dianis, an expert on all good things. It's a red scare in the Republican Party. Why are they always talking about the Soviet Union? Well, these guys accept it. It's over. The big fight between us and the Soviets is over. It's over ever since the Yeltsin stood up on that tank against the Red Army. It's good that it's over, isn't it? There's only a few people that don't like it not being over, and they keep saying Soviet Union. This is Hardball, a place for politics.